Hello, I'm Jamie.
Hello, I'm Mark, and it's time for another episode of Through the Garden Gate. Good evening, everybody, and it is episode number 75. Let's get Jamie in.
You're late.
It ticked over just as I was pressing go live to 31. Damn it.
I've just had our guest message me and say, I can't see the live.
Sorry.
So he said, that's it, I'm off.
Not it.
Not really, not really.
Not on time. I'm out.
How are you, mate?
Not too bad.
Good.
Ready for some nicer weather. It's been absolutely hideous again for the last 2 days, hasn't it?
It's been really cold, but I've noticed a lot of other people are saying it's been raining a lot, but we ain't had any rain. It's been really cold, bitterly cold, but no rain.
Right, we've had rain literally like the last 4 days in a row, on and off.
No, nothing. Thankfully, because our horse feels like a bloody quagmire. It's terrible.
God, a bit like my garden then.
Matthew has very terribly high standards. Told you. You're going to be in trouble when he comes on.
Where's that message? I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Selective message.
What have you been doing at work? Have you done some gardening or has it been too wet?
Well, I've been doing administration, job-related stuff.
Something.
No, not a lot of gardening. I've done some, but yeah, it's been frustrating really because I'd rather be out getting my hands dirty. But you know, if I want an extra person or people working with me this year, I need to get all that side of things sorted.
People? What do you mean people? Explain.
So there is a possibility that we might have more than one person, but we'll see how things go.
Yeah.
Because of how things went last year, we're possibly looking at doing something different this year and trying to create a bit of a team.
You mean
to get the garden.
You need 2 people to replace Chris?
Chris is that good, we might even need 4 people to replace. In terms of personality, I don't think you'll ever replace Chris, will you?
Oh, good God, no. Definitely not. No. Well, guess what? I've actually done some gardening.
I know. I've seen with your mucky hands.
I've done
2 days
gardening. I can't believe it. On 2 accounts now. Brilliant. I've sown all my chilies and my micro tomatoes. Nobody's seen that yet because I haven't put the reels out, but I've done all that the other day. And I potted up my raspberry canes yesterday. Brilliant.
Well, ready for the season.
Just doing it because I haven't touched, well, as you know, as everybody probably knows, I haven't touched any compost or soil for 2 months now, probably. And just to I sat in the greenhouse and got my hands in the compost, just changes your mental state instantly.
It's that serotonin getting back into your brain again after.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
6 weeks.
Brilliant. Absolutely amazing. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Yeah, so hopefully this is the way it's going to go now. A bit more gardening every so often. Still can't dig. Still can't, can't shovel and do any big stuff. But
well, it's
sowing seeds,
really, because sowing seeds and stuff like that's just starting to get going. So
exactly, and that's the thing. So I got all them done. But sowing seeds in little propagators and trays, it's not heavy anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. I can do all that
as long as the bag's where you need it to be, and you don't have to lift a heavy bag of compost.
That's the thing. I got Teresa to move the bag and put it in place, and then that was it. I didn't.
On your pie bench, and away you go.
I sat on the floor. I sat on the floor in a greenhouse and done it. It was brilliant. Absolutely loved it. An hour in a greenhouse was lovely.
So I'll share a funny story with you on the same lines of what I've been doing this week and ringing people regarding the job. So when I was on the phone to one of the candidates, he said, "I found you. on Instagram and seen some of your videos.
Oh.
It's like, oh my god. So he'd seen the video when, I don't know whether you remember it, when Chris still worked there, when Chris was doing a live or something, and I was in a different area of the garden, and he sort of walked down the garden to see me. So he'd seen that live, and I'm sure he's seen all the other ridiculous things that me and Chris got up to. But I just, oh god. How did he find me? Because he didn't even know my name, really, other than my first name. So,
well, the thing is, that probably makes him think, oh, he's quite a laid-back boss. Be nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it works both ways, doesn't it? But I mean, he's a former policeman, so he's definitely good at his police job. That's for sure.
Oh wow! Yeah, investigation.
Yeah,
it's so easy to find people these days on social media.
That completely threw me off mid-conversation. I was just like, oh god, and had to like, readjust myself. Luckily, he was a really nice guy. So.
Exactly, you had to change your whole interview and thing on a completely different way. Right now, so you've seen me prattling around, so I better.
Yeah, we do actually do work, honest.
Yeah. Oh, good. So you're dwindling them down.
Yeah.
To find your candidate.
There's probably 5 or 6 now. Hopefully, get them to the site.
Yeah.
In the next few weeks or so, and hopefully have somebody or some bodies to get going.
Exciting. Good.
Definitely need it.
Perfect timing as well, when everything's now ramping up, start getting busy.
Yeah, and I'm, when you get days like this when I'm trying to do organisation and all the head gardenery stuff, and I'm sat there going, there's no gardening getting done.
Yeah.
Whereas at least if you've got somebody on site with you, there, you can spread the load a little bit.
Yeah, but the head gardening things, it's got to be done, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lot of that is in conjunction with the outdoor bit.
Yeah. And if you don't get organised, your whole year gets more complicated.
Like ordering skips. What's that bloody great skip for?
Oh, ginormous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we tend to get one every now and again just to clear, because I'll pile stuff up in the sort of compound area, and when they've been doing all the work, the contractors, they dug out a lot of the old irrigation pipes, drip lines, so there was a massive pile of that, which I can't really do anything else with other than put in the skip. And then the other thing I've been doing today is I took out a path from one of the beds not last year, the year before, and that's in a pile in the compound as well. So what I was doing is clearing all the concrete off of the little sets. They're like a couple of inch, like cobble type things. Yeah. So I'm trying to save as many of the whole ones as I can, and then just get rid of all the concrete into the skip. Trying to be as sustainable as possible, rather than just binning the whole lot. Some people probably would.
Oh yeah, of course they would.
But yeah, the whole ones I will be able to use again at some point in the future.
That's a good thing, I suppose. Where you are, you've got lots of place to store stuff until you're ready to do it.
Yeah. Well, you always need, in a garden like that, you always need somewhere to pile random bits of stuff, because you never know when you might need it.
Yeah.
Whether it's logs or sticks or bamboo canes or,
Yeah, and that big area where we park the cars with all the muck heaps and things.
Yeah,
it's perfect around there. Yeah. Nobody else is going to see it, is it?
No, it's like the gardening work area where where everything is and everywhere else is tidy.
Yeah, I've got several of them messy areas. There's one over there. There's one around there. If I show people around, I have to, take them on a long detour to miss them all to get through to the garden. Yeah, don't look. Shut your eyes for a second. Oh, brilliant. Lovely. Who's our guest tonight?
So, this is going to be a long intro because of who our guest is tonight. Okay. It is our first ever guest who has their own Wikipedia page. So this will be a long intro, sorry.
Yeah, I read that.
He is designed 2 gardens at the Chelsea Flower Show, one winning the coveted People's Choice Award. He is a writer, a radio and TV broadcaster. He also is a regular guest on BBC Gardener's Question Time. He has also been the curator of RHS Hyde Hall and Harlow Car. Finally, he was listed as one of the top 50 garden designers in House and Garden magazine in 2021.
Wow.
It is, of course, Matthew Wilson.
Good
Hello.
evening.
Who's this guy you're talking about? He sounds really good.
Does, doesn't he?
He sounds really good. Who is he? I'm impressed. It's a
How are
good
you?
job, actually. You didn't get one of the other Matthew Wilsons, because my name is not that uncommon. Wilson is the 7th most common surname in the UK. And the combination of Matthew and Wilson is shared by myself, an Australian soap opera actor, a ballet dancer, a former World Rally Championship driver, and my favourite is the 2010 Canadian duck calling champion.
Wow.
So you've got to be very thankful there that you could have been moments away from saying our next guest is the first ever duck calling champion that we've had. If you got the wrong Wikipedia page,
That would
but
have
there we go.
been amazing. That would have been so funny.
Disappointed.
Yeah,
Oh, he's got the wrong one.
yeah,
Come on. Who wants to be a duck calling champion? Yeah, definitely. God.
yeah. I know, and it's quite something. It's worth checking out his videos because it's quite a thing, and they have a big audience, and he's up on the stage doing various varieties of duck. I don't know quite what the criteria are for judging. I'd love to know. And people seem to go wild for this duck calling business. But there we go. I suppose long winters in Canada, there's maybe not much to do.
No,
I don't know.
probably not. No. I will. I will admit that over the last few days, I have been googling and reading a lot about you, which I do all my guests. Obviously to try and find out things. And I listened to Adam Kirkland's interview with you through not through the Garden Gate, Potting Bench.
View from
Yes.
And View from the Potting Bench. And right at the end, he asks you a few questions, which you have to answer. And one of them was, I think it was, if you could only have one genus of plants in your garden. And while you were thinking, I was thinking, oh, what would I have? What would I have? And I thought, I'll tell you what, I'll have salvia. I love salvia. And then you went salvia. I went, yes!
Well,
Absolutely
they're a great genus because there's so much in there, isn't there? You've got edible salvias, herbs,
amazing.
genuinely edible plants, which are fantastic. Then you've got a whole variety of, really wide variety actually of ornamental salvias, which we tend to think of them maybe as being sun-loving plants, but of course there are some that will actually take really quite wet soils. Garanitica doesn't mind a damp soil. Uliganosa, that doesn't mind a damp soil. Some of the meadow sages, obviously, they don't mind dampish soils. And then you've got things like, the one salvia I wish you just can't, it's very hard to get. You can get it from sort of specialist nurseries, but you wouldn't be able to get it from the sort of, if you like, more common or garden nurseries or garden centres, is Salvia candelabrum, which I don't know whether anyone on this live has grown it or is growing it. It's an amazing thing. It's got a sort of low, quite a low foliage that looks superficially like Salvia officinalis, the sage, but it's much more silvery foliage.
Mm.
And you think, okay, that's nice. It's evergreen, does its thing all year round, and then in sort of around June, around about the same time Stipa gigantea is happening, it sends up these incredibly long, tall, thin, wiry flower spikes. And I mean tall, they're getting sort of 1.5 meters plus high, these things.
Wow.
And then produces these wonderful, characteristic blue, lipped zygometric salvia flowers. Just really beautiful thing. impossible to photograph because it's so light and airy. You photograph it, it's like you've taken a photograph of a ghost. People are like, what am I looking at? I can't, what? It's a plant. It's great. It's a sort of like an anti. It's like an anti-social media plant because if you were filming it on your mobile and trying to stream it live, people would be going, "No, there's nothing there. He's completely lost it. He's completely lost it." But it's a brilliant thing, and for a gravel garden or if you've got a really sort of sunny bank or something like that, and if you grow it with something like Stipa gigantea, which also had a sort of same airy quality,
Mm.
it's a wonderful thing. Really lovely, but hard to get hold of.
Oh wow, I have to have a look for that one.
Mm. Salvia
I've
candelabra.
I've got I think it was 2 years ago, Mark. I sent you a picture and said, "What is this? A salvia? Can you remember?"
Oh
Because it's
yeah,
huge. It grows
yeah,
up
it's
to 8 foot. No, 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 it's not. It's a blue one, but it
That's a
grows
big
up
one.
to 8 foot, and it's got leaves, this size and lovely blue. But I just don't know, can't find out what it is. But it's huge, absolutely
Not
huge.
not Garanistica.
I think it begins with C.
Not because there's Confertiflora, but that's got red flowers, hasn't it?
No, it's definitely a lovely royal blue flower.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
Okay.
I've obviously bought it at some point, but
Yeah.
I can't find a label. I just haven't got a clue what it is. I'll
Yeah.
have to do a bit more investigating. Yeah, it's lovely. But I love salvias. Really love them.
Great plants.
Yeah.
We've got either side of our front door. We've got two. In fact, I'm slightly fearful one may have succumbed to old age. We've got two pots. They're not particularly big, and in them, about 6 years ago, I planted a pair of Salvia nachvlinder, night moth, and nachvlinder is one of the Gemensis types. The sort of half. It used to be called half hardy, and now it's Salvia hot lips is the most famous one of the lot, I suppose.
Yeah.
And they have been out the front of our house through thick and thin, hot and cold, really neglected by me. I occasionally remember to put some liquid feed on them. Very rarely do I water them, even though they're in pots. I think the roots have now gone down into the gravel underneath. They are amazing. They are, I would say, at least a metre across,
Wow.
semi-evergreen, and probably half a metre high. So they form this sort of lovely dense canopy. And then all through summer, these intense, deep, almost sort of inky blue flowers. Oh, and the foliage, every time they're right by where we put our wellies when we come back from walking the dog. So even in winter, you sort of park the wellies next to it and you get that incredible waft of
Oh,
zesty sort of
it's the
salvia foliage.
best smell
Amazing.
in the world. It's
Yeah.
lovely. Absolutely amazing. There's one right in our patio there where we sit and eat outside, and every time the dog's tail bashes it, it's just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Really,
There
really
we go. We're
nice.
salvias.
What do you think of the hot lipses and things then? Because a lot of people are getting a bit turned off by them now.
Well, we've always grown them. I think we started growing them when we were in our previous garden, which was in southeast London, and again they were kind of always made it through the winter. They were sort of evergreen, really, in those sort of conditions. Where I am now, we've been in Rutland in the East Midlands for 10 years. Our winters are harder. The house is a lot more exposed. We're in a valley. The front of the house is south facing, and I can grow well, obviously half hardy salvias and leave them out year round, and they're absolutely fine. I can grow a whole
Yeah.
range of kind of gravelly plants, sun-loving gravelly plants. Back of the house on the north-facing side, though, we've got salvias in pots, and they struggle through the winter. But I have a theory about this. I have a theory that it is partly to do with them being on the north face or north side of the house and therefore more exposed in winter. But I think what's really made the difference with the ones at the front is, as I mentioned, they've rooted down into the gravel. And because they've got down in the gravel, they've got this almost perfect drainage layer because they're in a pot. They're not getting overly wet. the roots are in the gravel. The roots are therefore taking up nutrients and keeping them going, and perhaps providing them with a better level of feed than they would otherwise get. And yeah, they're fine. Those ones, wintertime, they look pathetic. So I guess hot lips has had its moment in the sun, hasn't it? And like all plants, plants that are fashionable, it's a bit like kipper ties and platform shoes. It once fashionable, destined to go out of
Yeah.
fashion. One for the kids, kipper ties and platform shoes. But yes, they are inevitably going to go out of fashion, and I think hot lips is it's quite a marmitey plant, isn't it?
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
wife loves it.
Yeah. I've got one. I've got one tucked in the border. Yeah. Yeah. I don't mind them. I like all the salvias.
Yeah.
So where did your journey? I don't like saying journey. Your gardening love come from originally? Your very first original memories.
When you say the word journey, is this at the point at which Mark sort of gets the string quartet out of the cupboard? And now for Matthew's journey.
July.
My turn. Yeah. Oh, it was so hard.
I had to go
Um,
to Australia to learn duck calling.
yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. I grew up very simple. I grew up on a cut flower nursery in Kent. My parents ran and owned a cut flower nursery. My dad was actually he was actually trained at East Malling Research Station and worked on the apple rootstock program at East Malling. So if anyone here is anyone listening is or watching grows fruit with an rootstock, MM25, MM106, whatever it might be, or M25 rather, MM106, very common dwarfing rootstocks. Chances are my dad worked on them. So the apple rootstock program at East Malling Research Station was a really interesting one because it was essentially looking at dwarfing rootstocks, which have been around since the time of Alexander the Great, believe it or not, and were known, to. In fact, Alexander the Great wrote to. He wrote to who was his mentor? I want to say it was Aristotle. I think it was. He wrote to Aristotle saying, "I found these fruit trees that have this dwarfing capacity, and it turns out that they are on these rootstocks." It's quite incredible, really. So there were lots and lots of rootstocks, but no one really knew what they were, and people gave them fancy names, like the French in particular gave them loads of names that all seemed to be paradise this, paradise that. And it actually turned out that not only were the names quite confusing and misleading, but often they were the same rootstock. So in the early 1900s, East Malling started to effectively recode what all of these rootstocks were, to look at them, carry out experiments, and these experiments were quite incredible. I've got photographs from that time of they would dig an entire tree out of the ground with its complete root system and measure the roots, suspend it in a room. It's almost like a kind of Andy Goldsworthy installation.
Wow.
It's quite something. And they'd take all these measurements and work out, what was going on. And eventually they managed to sort of sift through all the history of these rootstocks and find out which ones were which, give them new, clearer names so that everyone knew what they were. And that's where he was in the sort of post-war period. And that's also where he met my mum. So my mum was a post-war land army girl. And they met there, got together, moved to Knockholt in Kent, which is a little village near Sevenoaks on the North Downs, bought a plot of land, set up the nursery, lived in a caravan for about 10 years because they didn't have the money for a house, and grew cut flowers. I can recall as a very, very young, I would say probably maybe 6 or 7, something like that. My sort of summer holiday treat was being put in the van and driving up to London to Covent Garden, old Covent Garden Market, because that was still trading then,
Yeah.
with my dad to go and sell these lovingly cut and boxed dahlia stems,
Brilliant.
xanthemums, alstromerias, and going and selling them to the traders at Covent Garden Market. So that was my childhood, and I was not particularly interested in the horticultural side at all. But what I loved being outdoors.
Mm.
I loved being that connection with the countryside. I I loved being in the workshop. The workshop was technically out of bounds to me because I'd been very naughty when I was younger. My dad was stripping down one of the oil boilers that fired the greenhouse heating, and he'd laid everything out on sheets of paper very carefully, labeled it all. And I went down, I went, whee! So yeah,
I
so I
can
was the work.
imagine why.
Yeah.
Oh my
So
God.
the workshop was out of bounds to me, but if I could get in there, I was very, very happy when I got in there because all the incredible old carpentry tools all sort of on the wall, with a line around them like a scene of crime. And I've got pretty much all of those tools. Some of them go back to my granddad's time, and they're all down in my little barn down at the end of the garden,
Wow.
and they've all got the lines around them like a scene of crime. It's
Oh,
like I
brilliant.
completely recreated my childhood down there. And yeah, so that was kind of I suppose the introduction to the idea of plants and the countryside and being outdoors. And I think all of that was clear. It made a big impression on me. When I really, really hated school. I was not a good student. I was not an attentive student. I must have been massively frustrating to teach because I think my teachers could all see that I was reasonably intelligent, but I was just one of those,
Yeah.
you can imagine what my school reports were like. I mean, it was must do better plus 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 because I was just not
No.
engaged at all, and eventually not engaged to the extent that I was expelled. So that was
What?
yeah. That's not on my Wikipedia page, is it?
Right.
Um, So yeah, and the really weird thing is, I'm now kind of many many years later, have caught up with a few people that I was at school with at that time, via social media, and it seems that most of the people who were at my school at that time had a great time. They really loved it, and actually, I think of it as being a really terrible school because it was a terrible school. It was an awful school, but despite being a terrible school, it produced some really quite extraordinary students for a period of about 4 or 5 years. So Anton de Beck was in my year at
Oh, wow.
school. Him off the Strictly. Um, yeah, he was in my class for a bit, I think. Jerome Flynn of Robson and Jerome fame and Game of Thrones. If you watch that,
Wow.
he was head boy when he was 2 years ahead of me, and in my drama class because I did drama O level, showing my age at O level. Um, England international footballer John Solarco, he was a year below me. Yeah, I mean, if you're into 90s synth dance music, Orbital, the band Orbital,
Yeah, yeah.
both brothers, older brother 2 years above, younger brother 1 year below. So it
Wow.
was like this kind of very creative people coming out of that school, but I just could not get on with it. I couldn't get on with it, and I couldn't wait to get out. And eventually, the school decided couldn't wait for me to get out either. So off I was on my travels, and I then sort of proceeded to do a whole range of really incredibly menial. I just didn't know what I was going to do. I wanted to do music. Music was the thing that I really wanted to do, and so I kind of did rubbishy jobs to support a not very successful musical career,
Mm.
um, and then in my mid 20s, had this Damascene moment where I kind of fell back in love with all the things that I loved when I was little, and that led me into horticulture.
Right. And I think everybody who we ever have on, and we ask very similar question to that, have always got those memories of being young, and around somebody in the garden, out in the garden, and then 9 times out of 10 it all disappears, like it did me. My dad had vegetable plot in the in the front garden, and then the back was all his flowers, the same as a granddad. But then I used to be out there all the time. But through my teens and 20s and even 30s, nothing. I didn't even want to cut the lawn.
No.
But I knew it was all in there. When I was walking around people's gardens, I knew what it was. I knew what it was. I knew, I knew how to do it because it was all been taken in. But then, as you get older, it all comes back out again. So I think most people who are gardeners have got that from when they were kids.
And I think that is why it's so important to give children a positive introduction to gardens and a positive
Yeah.
experience with gardens. And the only way you can kind of make that happen is to meet them on their terms.
Mm.
To sort of find out what they're into, introduce them to things, find out what they're into, and then try and keep them engaged in that for as long as possible. We have 16-year-old twins. I think our boy and a girl. Our daughter, I think she's aware that there's a garden outside, but maybe I don't know. Um, our son still comes and helps me in the garden. He loves
Yeah.
getting the sledgehammer out, smashing things up, that sort
Yeah.
of thing. Obviously, he's partly motivated by the filthy lucre that I offer him, but that's fine. I mean, because he's putting in hard work, and if he's putting
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
hard work, I don't mind, incentivizing him. But even though they react with the outdoors differently from how they did when they were younger, and we were always outdoors, and they were helping me in the garden and
Yeah.
passing me plants, and we were planting bulbs and sowing seeds. They don't do any of that now, but I know it's in them. I know it's
Mm.
there, and I know that when we have experiences as a family where we are, engaging with something in the countryside or wildlife or whatever, that enthusiasm, that love is there. It all comes
Mm.
back up to the surface. So I think that as long as you introduce children to those ideas, that concept when they're young, it will stay with them
Mm.
for sure.
What do you think about having it in schools then? Because there's so many people trying to get it, so there's something on the curriculum. Do you think that would be good?
Well, I was interested to hear as you were chatting before I came on that that Mark's recruitment drive as he develops his empire, and I think what's interesting is that for a lot of people would find that quite challenging recruiting at the
Right.
moment.
Yeah.
I think it's never been harder. There's never been. I think there's very few people coming into the industry, um, and it's a big industry, and there's lots of different layers to it. From gardening on estates, private estates, to public-facing gardening, like I used to do when I worked for the RHS, to landscaping, to garden design, landscape design, like landscape architecture, and then all the stuff around growing protected crops, fruit. I mean, it's a massive, massive,
Mm.
massive industry that generates multi-billion pounds a year, but it doesn't seem to be taken particularly seriously by anyone.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think as a career choice, it doesn't seem to necessarily feature very strongly, at curricular level, or when it comes to schools talking to students about what their possible career options might be.
No.
We've worked with our local secondary school to create a sensory garden outside their send. They have a really good send department there, looking after children with special educational needs, and we made this. I hate the term sensory garden because all gardens are sensory, but it's handy.
Yeah.
It's a handy, uh, shortcut to make you think about what we. So lots of grasses, lots of tactile plants, lots of things that, but also quite a sort of strong geographical aspect, so that they could use it for helping to support the geography curriculum. You know, I mean, you think about plants, you can do so much about it. You can talk about history through plants, geography through plants, art, color, sex, pollination, etc. Medicine. How many of our modern medicines are derived from plants? I mean, I kind of get to the point. I think actually there's not really much that you cannot describe through plants. It's absolutely brilliant from an educational perspective. So anyway, we did some work with them, and what's been brilliant about that, we did it all as a sort of voluntary thing, and it's been incredibly rewarding, because the students are actively involved in looking after that garden and adding plants to the garden.
Yeah.
And given that we're in quite a rural area, it's quite interesting. I can tell the tulips that have been planted by the kids of farmers, because they're all in straight lines. But it's been great, you know, and I think the kids that have been involved in that have really engaged with it and really enjoyed it. And I just think to myself, you know, okay, my dad, when my dad sort of, when I got back into this line, my dad was by that point a head gardener in Kent, on a big estate in Kent, quite a well-known, quite important historic estate. And I'd gone and I had been doing the most mundane jobs working for him, mostly in the kitchen garden. And he said to me this immortal phrase that I still rings in my ears today, which was, you know what, you should think about doing this for a living. You'll never be a millionaire, but you'll always have a job, and you'll always have a sense of achievement. And he's right on all three counts, unless there's some missing Wilson millions somewhere, which I haven't. They might be under the dog basket. I'm not sure. I don't think there are. So, and I don't think enough is. I think when we talk to children about potential careers, this idea of fulfillment isn't something that we necessarily stress enough. You know, how you know, we come this way but once, unless you're a Buddhist, and we, you know, that having a life of fulfillment is something that, I know you've got to pay the bills and everything else, but having a life of fulfillment is something that feels to me so incredibly important, and yet we don't talk to children about that. Our kids have just finished their mocks, and they are about to, well, they've put their applications in for A-level colleges. And we have stressed to them, both through their GCSEs and their A-levels, do what you want to do what you're interested in. You know, don't do, I mean, it would be hopeless either of them doing a maths degree, because they've both got my maths brain. 3 plus 3 is... no, they're both better at me, much better at me than maths, which is quite terrifying. But you know, they're doing things that they enjoy, as well as their core stuff, and I feel that's so important. And I feel that there's just too much, whether it's because of social media or I don't know what, but there's too much emphasis on it all being about the money and the show, and oh, look at me with my wrapped Lamborghini, and you know, it's just so like, that's, I'm sorry guys, but that, if that's what you think is fulfillment, that's not going to fill your heart with joy at all. You know, it really isn't.
And that kind of thing doesn't come along very often. It's the same, you know, when they say, I want to be a footballer. Amazing if you can be a professional footballer, but how many professional footballers are there in this country? Not many.
Not many.
You know,
Yeah.
that's the thing. So I think even if, I think
really
if the kids just get that seed sown when they're younger, not necessarily getting pushed into the job, even if, so when they get their own house, they've got a bit of a passion for their own gardens.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I spend quite a bit of time in the Netherlands because you know I've got a few nursery suppliers there and hard landscape material suppliers in the sort of south of the Netherlands and into Belgium. It's really, really interesting seeing how their sort of sense of civic pride in their horticulture is everywhere.
Mm.
You know, you drive through a village in the Netherlands, you don't see a bad garden. You don't see a front garden with 5 cars parked on it, seven wheelie bins and a load of concrete. Just doesn't
Yeah,
happen. Just
No.
doesn't happen. You know, it's extraordinary, and I think it's because it's just built into their psyche.
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, it's just something that they really seem to enjoy, relate to, you know, and just comes very naturally.
yeah. That's quite a sad thing, actually. So I've been off work for 6 weeks. I had a heart operation at Christmas time. But last week, my friend said, "Oh, come on, I'll pick you up and take you for some breakfast because I'm not doing much." So after breakfast, he said, "Oh, where should we go? I've got a couple of hours." I said, "I'll just drive around my old estate. I lived on a council estate where I grew up, where my dad had his veg plot in the front garden. So one side was a lovely, perfect lawn, and the other side was a veg patch. And he used to double dig it every year. And so we went started driving around this estate, and I was going, "Oh, I haven't been on it for probably 30 years." And there's looking at all the different houses and think, oh God, this is so bad. I don't know if I want to go and see my family home. And as we pulled up to it, the fence was down, the trees was down, it was concrete over the whole back, the whole front garden. There was a car parked on it and a washing machine in there. And I just thought, oh, it's just so sad.
Yeah,
Exactly what you just said. You know, it's absolutely gutted. That was all of my life. That's being in that garden with my dad on the weekend, digging, and it's just all gone.
yeah.
So sad.
It's yeah, it's quite hard going back. I when I was, oh gosh, maybe it was I think it was during the pandemic, actually, thinking about it. But the Garden Museum at Lambeth, which is a place I love going to, and have uh, uh, you know, fortunate to know Christopher, the director there, very well. And they asked me, they found out, I can't remember how, I think I'd written about it in the paper, in the Financial Times. I'd written about um, this big prefab estate in Catford called the Excalibur.
Wow.
And the Excalibur was that classic, you know, post-war um, prefab estate that was built to cover the short-term housing
Mm,
crisis that we had
mm,
because so many houses have been knocked down by bombs. And my uncle Jim lived there in a prefab, and Jim had been paralysed during World War II, and quite a tragic story actually. He was paralysed. He never actually made it to a field of combat. He was at the docks, and they were loading ships, you know, waiting to. Uh, this would have been right at the start of the war, actually, think of his age. So I think it was probably as they were heading out with the expeditionary force to try and hold back the Germans, and a packing crate on a crane fell. He went to push somebody out of the way who was about to get hit by it, and it hit him on
oh,
the back of the neck, and he was paralysed. So, and he had a young son and a wife, and 2 years after that happened, his wife died from tuberculosis at the age of 30. So
gosh.
he's left paralysed with a young son. Anyway, he ended up in this prefab on the Excalibur estate, and he absolutely loved it. And even though the houses were sort of, you know, these little boxes of, you know, prefabricated
Yeah,
material, they had running water, they had central heating, they had hot water, they were accessible, which for him was brilliant, and they had gardens.
yeah.
And you know, Jim, all my maternal family were from Bermondsey, Deptford, Greenwich in southeast London, from back-to-back houses, no gardens, just a yard, you know, working class, common as muck. And he had this garden, and I remember going to visit him as a child, and he was a very talented man. He could play the spoons. Not many people play the spoons anymore. Uh, and he could also play the zither, which is an instrument which again is not played often enough. I think the
Never
zither.
heard of a
Um,
zither.
The zither is if you a picture or conjure up in your ear, if you will, the theme tune from The Third Man, and if you can't think of what that goes like, you'll recognise the music. I will now hum it for you, twang it for you. It goes da 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 da
Yeah.
da
Yeah.
da.
Mm-hmm.
Da, 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 all together now. And that's
Yeah.
played on a zither. It's got a
Okay.
twang, twang, twang. He could play that and he could play the
Right.
spoons. Anyway, this all sounds like a massive digression, but it's not. The people who lived on the Excalibur, on 270 homes on the Excalibur estate, every street named after Arthurian legend, hence the Excalibur,
Oh.
had these wonderful gardens that they adored, and they planted trees and they planted shrubs, and they grew edibles, and they made the place look wonderful, even though these were people from some of the most impoverished parts of blitzed London,
Mm.
translocated to this you know um, to this estate. They really made the most of it. And during the pandemic, Christopher Woodward at the Garden Museum got in touch with me and said, could we get you down to do a little film about it? And you can find it on their website if you want to have a look at it, the Excalibur Estate, because it's being demolished.
Oh.
And now the prefabs, to be fair, were only designed to last for 10 years.
Yeah.
So they'd lasted 70 years, which is pretty amazing, really. What was slightly depressing about it was that they were just doing this wholesale flattening everything, including the gardens. So all these trees that had been grown, a lot of them grown
Yeah.
from seed, all the shrubs. And anyway, I went and I met with some of the people who were still there, and I tried to find Uncle Jim's old house, but unfortunately that had already been demolished.
No
So
shame.
that had already gone. But what was extraordinary about it was meeting people. There was a lady in her late 70s, I would say, and every plant in that garden she knew as if it was a friend. Oh, I bought that one from Woolworths. It was just a stick
Yeah.
when I got it, and there it was, this lovely, bountiful a butylon, covered in flowers. Yeah, it was just a little stick. And I said, oh, that's an butylon. I've had it for 30 years. I've never known what it was. And she had a Paulonia tomentosa foxglove tree in her garden,
Wow.
which she'd grown from a seed, which was like, oh, I didn't know what it was. I found it under this tree that I really liked, and I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. And all of that sadly is going to go. And be replaced by the 270 houses have been replaced by 360 houses, which will have tiny gardens, which will
Mm-hmm.
be full of rubble, which will be incredibly hard for people to garden in. And I think we can do better. I think we can do better. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yes. Such a shame.
Yeah.
We seem to be losing the connection with nature more and more, which is why kids aren't getting into gardening either. Because I mean, kids will grow up on these estates like that have literally got a postage stamp of a garden,
Yeah.
and there's nothing growing in it because there's no space.
There's no space, and the way in which modern housing developments are made, they don't. There's no real consideration. I don't think. I think maybe I'm wrong about this. I'd like to be wrong about this, but when developers and their architects are looking at a plot of land, I wonder whether they, for building purposes, I wonder what they are thinking. I wonder if they're thinking, okay, if we orientate this street like this, then all of those houses are going to have lovely south-facing plots. And maybe we can just do something here and give some of those a bit west, and maybe we can make a bit more. Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure they
Mm.
are thinking about that.
No way.
So the gardens are small, as you say. They don't, obviously they're not really putting a lot of care into how the soil is looked after before it's put back into the plot. It's all stripped off, put in a big pile, sometimes taken away, and a new soil's brought in. And so I don't think they're easy to garden. I think you've got to really put a lot of effort and time and energy in, which people don't have with modern living. and all of that is we're losing so much all the time. I get the need for new housing, obviously, clearly. I
Yeah.
worry about how my kids are going to afford to buy a house. I know we need new houses. I think, I just think we can do better. I just think we can do better, and I think we should be able to come up with. I cannot believe that we don't build houses that aren't all built to something close to passive house standards, or that have a much higher requirement environmentally. I just don't
It's
get
crazy,
that.
absolute craziness.
Yeah, yeah,
There's no space on new estates. They just want to squeeze every house in as possible. I've been down a new estate and you can't even get two cars round the corner on a road together. You have to wait
no,
to get round. And
no,
it's just everywhere. And a lot of them now are 3 stories, so it's just blocking so much more light out as well.
it
Just
is. Yeah,
you haven't got hope in hell.
And
and
they don't have front
unfortunately,
gardens.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, front gardens are, they're
Definitely
effectively extinct, aren't they? Pretty
not.
much on new builds. And of course, so many cars on new
Yeah.
estates that adds to the kind of pressure on green space, because if they have put communal lawns at the front, they then just get used as ad hoc parking spaces. So
Yeah.
we had a situation in our local town where there's quite a lot of house building going on, and I mean, in my day job as a garden designer, I work quite a lot with local planning authorities. Not normally in, I'm not, I don't think I've ever worked with a developer on a new housing estate, because they wouldn't ask for somebody like me.
No.
But I work with a lot of sort of householders who might be doing work to their house, for example.
Yeah.
So I understand that local authority planning departments are under massive pressure, under resourced, etc. But I hope that the new government is going to do what they've said they're going to do, and look at how planning is, how it works, and change it. Because there was a development in the local town, and at the front of the plot were 6 like really beautiful mature trees, 3 oaks, 3 ash. And as soon as that plot was earmarked for building, I thought, well, I hope they're going to put proper, tree protection in. Well, they kind of did. They just got a chainsaw out and chopped them all down.
No way.
And I asked a project manager friend of mine, and I said, how is that even possible? Because I know that you get fined, basically. You get fined 20,
Yeah.
20 grand, 20 grand a tree, you get fined. And he said to me, well, they just build it into their costs.
Yeah.
They know
No way.
that
You're
they know that they're
joking.
going to, yeah, they know they're going to do it. They know they want to do it because that makes the job easier for them if those pesky trees aren't there. So they just chop them down and pay the fine.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
yeah,
Because the thing is, I work in the building trade and I see some trees that have got TPOs on them. You think, why?
yeah. Well, that's the
You
other
know,
side of it. Yeah,
yeah, and then they go and chop down magnificent trees like you were just describing. It's absolutely crazy.
it is. And actually, on that note, I had a client on one of our projects in Yorkshire who had an absolutely gigantic Western hemlock in her garden. Completely inappropriate tree for it was a reasonable sized garden, but ultimately it was, if that tree falls over, it's going to wipe her house out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big, heavy tree. And so we applied to have it removed on the basis that it had various structural defects, had twin leader, and it was not in great shape. And it was just the wrong tree.
Mm.
And we put in the planting proposal to replant 16 trees in total in the garden, but appropriate trees, sorbus, malus, prunus, the right kind of size
Yeah.
trees. And it was turned down, and so that tree is still there. And it was turned down because of the amenity value of the tree from outside the garden, because you could see the top of it from the street. So
Oh my goodness.
there we go.
Yeah.
So it's a funny old business, the world of planning, and hopefully it will it will be overhauled, because it does need to be overhauled.
Yeah, definitely. Really, really strange. So we change subject.
Yes, because it's all. I got a bit ranty there.
Sometimes you need to rant,
Oh yeah,
unfortunately.
definitely.
Sometimes.
Good to have a good rant, especially when there's no one there to rant back at you. It's nice. Let's talk about Chelsea, shall we?
Oh
Designing
yes,
Chelsea gardens,
yes,
just absolutely lovely. Chelsea. A lot of people say, "I don't know Chelsea." I absolutely love it. Love it.
yes,
I can't. It's my favourite show of the whole year from anybody.
yes.
Love it. And you've designed two.
I have.
Wow.
I have. I have. I wonder why people don't like Chelsea. Some people, I think it's too. Can one say up itself? One
Yeah.
can say that. I think some people feel that way about it. Maybe some people feel that it's too exclusive, but it
Think a
isn't.
lot of people think it's out of their reach. The
Yeah,
standard
but
small
it isn't.
garden.
You go there when you go there, as I'm sure you do when you go there. You go into the floral pavilion, and just talk to the nursery people in there. They're just completely normal people. And you
Yeah.
actually go and talk to the garden designers, completely normal people. You know, the one thing that I've learned from this world that we are all so keen on, is that it's full of nice people. And it's
Mm.
full of people that want to share their knowledge, that are generous with their knowledge. I don't think anyone should. I think maybe people watch the TV coverage and see, maybe they see the sort of gala evening, which is, all the, CEOs of the FTSE
Yeah.
500. That's got nothing to do with what
No.
Chelsea is about. That's a money making exercise that helps the RHS do its charitable work through the course of the year. Forget all of that. Forget, the Monday afternoon when the royal family rock up.
Mm.
Lovely for them to see the show without anyone there. But forget all of that. My top tip for Chelsea. I hope no one from the RHS is watching this. I'll get in terrible trouble. Um, if you go late, get an late afternoon ticket and arrive. I think it kicks in at about 3:30. And if you arrive then, people are starting to go.
Mm.
And if you just stay and just keep hanging on, dress smart, look like you mean business, and
Yeah.
then the hospitality starts at about 8 o'clock, and the tannoy will say, Chelsea Flower Show is now closed. Will you please make your way to the exit? But of course, it's not closed for the hospitality people with their swing badges and whatever. So there you are. You've dressed smart. You look like you mean business. You've got your notebook and your and all of a sudden you're mixing it with the hospitality, and because you look smart and you look like you mean business. No one's hoiking you out, and before you know it, it's 9:30, and you've got a glass of champagne in your hand that someone's given you,
Fantastic.
maybe a canapé in the other one, and you're living the dream.
Top tip there.
Right. This
Yes.
year, Jamie.
So I love Chelsea, and I think the RHS. I mean, it's such a different beast from how it was. When I think I worked out that this last Chelsea was, I think, my 33rd Chelsea, I think, or
Wow.
something like that.
Mm.
It's such a different beast from how it was
Yeah.
then. The
Yeah.
RHS has worked incredibly hard to look into how they can make it more sustainable, which is an incredibly difficult thing. Just the very notion of a show garden based show garden and nursery show in that location on a site where they can't put any permanent infrastructure in because the Royal Hospital require them to remove absolutely everything at the end of the show. So it's not like they can sort of put stuff in the ground and then find it again the next year. That's so everything has to put in from scratch. It's an inherently unsustainable enterprise that they have worked very, very hard to make as sustainable as possible.
Mm.
And the emphasis now on gardens being rebuilt and plants being rehomed is brilliant. And yes, it doesn't still isn't sustainable. Of course, it isn't sustainable. Human beings aren't
No.
sustainable. It, for me, it doesn't matter, because what Chelsea does for 1 week of the year is it puts our little Cinderella industry on the front pages of every newspaper,
Yeah.
and it puts it on national TV and in magazines, and it gives our industry the chance to show what it
Number one.
can
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
to
Mm.
be this thing that we all know it can be, but that everyone else is like, oh, gardening, whatever, is it pushing a wheelbarrow around?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you see Chelsea and you see the glamour and the glitz, which I know is all a sideshow, but it's an important sideshow because it allows us to compete with everything else that's going on in the world for that week,
Mm.
and maybe doing so, that attracts people into the industry who wouldn't otherwise necessarily be interested,
Mm.
involved. And from
Definitely.
my point of view as a designer at Chelsea, what I do in terms of designing gardens for clients, most of the time those clients are private individuals, not always. um, Sometimes they are. Some of my work is commercial or heritage. So doing a big project with Harewood House at the moment, which obviously people will be able to visit. I've done work on hotels and other and national trust sites and things like that. But the majority is private work that is behind closed doors, and that aside from maybe a magazine article, no one's ever really going to get to see
Oh.
unless the owner thinks, oh, I know, I'll do NGS, which a couple of my clients have done, and which has been a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah.
What Chelsea allows me to do as a designer is hang my picture on the wall and go, there you go, that's what I
Yeah.
can do.
Mm.
And it's a unique proposition in that sense. I know obviously there are other flower shows. There are some great international shows, some of which have a sort of more long-term proposition, like Chaumont in France,
Yeah.
Jardin de Métis in Quebec, in Canada, um, some of the Chinese flower shows where they have this longer proposition. But it's the sort of muck and magic of Chelsea, which is so sets it apart, I think.
Mm.
And you
Yeah.
couldn't
No,
put it
definitely.
anywhere else; it wouldn't work.
No.
Do you think
No.
they'll ever
I
do
love it.
a show like that in this country and have a longer period? Because I've seen some of the shows abroad where they literally, it's like a year's installation, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's really good. I really like that idea.
Mm.
And strangely enough, when I was at Hyde Hall, which is now, I find it extraordinary to think it was 25 years ago that I started working at Hyde Hall. It's just madness. I myself and the legendary Bob Sweet, who was the head of shows development for the RHS, and the
Oh, yeah.
equally legendary Stephen Bennett, who was the director of shows. We all went on a road trip to Chaumont in France to see how they put together their the show, and how they work that idea of really quite conceptual gardens. The first year I went, the theme was garden. It was Jardin Mosaic, and so some people had created kind of parterre style gardens. Oh, somebody on the video saying Scone Palace is doing it this year, a 6-month installation.
Wow.
Okay, so that's good. So the year I went, yeah, it was uh, uh, Jardin Mosaic, and there was one installation that was no, it was mosaic culture. That's right, mosaic culture. So people who've been doing knot gardens, things like that, but one person had done a polytunnel, but it was covered in fleece instead of plastic, and you walked into it, and bolted onto the uprights of the polytunnel were petri dishes full of bacteria. So it was literally a mosaic of cultures.
Oh,
Oh,
my goodness.
And you know what? It was
Yes.
absolutely brilliant. It was
Yeah.
brilliant. Anyway, we went and had a look at that because there was a real energy at the time to do exactly that kind of thing at Hyde Hall, where there's lots of space,
Mm.
lots of land, and to have this very different approach. but it never happened, sadly. I think it would be a great thing, because what those shows enable is they enable a really conceptual response to an idea. And I think it's quite hard at places like Chelsea. Maybe it's a bit easier at Hampton Court, but certainly at Chelsea, you can't. If you go really high concept, it's quite difficult. It's a really difficult sell. Whereas at places like Jardin Ameti and Chaumont, you can go for a very, very conceptual approach, and people won't. I will just share this, because this is kind of relevant to this conversation. When I did my 2016 garden for Welcome to Yorkshire, the best in show that year was designed by James Busson, and it was an absolutely beautiful evocation of a sort of southwest France landscape. So it was essentially a kind of gravel garden with a path running through it, lots of native plants from the maquis and the garrigue, and it was quite, if you want to be negative, you could say it's quite weedy, but it was just really natural and beautiful. I loved it. I thought it was amazing. And my garden was inspired by the Great East Window at York Minster, and it had stained glass, and it had a lot of plants in it because I wanted the planting to represent the colours in the stained glass. So it was full of flowers, basically. Anyway, this chap on the first public day on the Tuesday, this chap sort of marched up to the garden. I got People's Choice, as you kindly said in your intro, but I only got a silver medal for that garden for various reasons, which I could bore you with, but I won't bore you with those technical reasons. Anyway, he came marching up to the garden and said, "Silver medal. They give you a silver medal for this beautiful garden, and they give that bloody goat tracker gold." I thought, well, there we go. Yes, that is the problem with conceptual gardens at Chelsea. They're not necessarily always going to land their punches. Whereas I think if you're going to somewhere like Shone, where it's going to be pushing the bound, it's gardens, yes, but it's also art, and it's I love a lot of the stuff that they do at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, where they're kind of meeting that point between landscape and art installation. I mentioned Andy Goldsworthy earlier. I think he's brilliant. I love his stuff, and a lot of that has references to gardens in it.
Yeah, it's great.
So it would be wonderful if it could happen here, because if you had that kind of a show, first of all, it would be a really lovely it could be made accessible to so many people. They don't have to be kind of Chelsea veterans like me. People with quite limited experience of design, but with a great idea. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I hope it might happen. I hope it
So
might happen.
are they open all year for people to visit, and then judged 4 or 5 times throughout the different seasons?
No, so Chaumont, I don't think they judge at all, and I don't think they judge at Jardin de Métis either. They open, so at Métis, because of the hard winters, they're only open for 5 months. Chaumont, I think, is open for 6. And what they do is they change the theme every year, but they retain a number of gardens from the previous year.
Right.
So they're kind of rolling over. So the oldest 3 or 4 gardens, ones that have been there for 20 odd years or whatever, they will be taken out and refreshed, and then new ones bought in. Maybe more than that, I don't know. And some are designed to be very ephemeral anyway. They're not designed with longevity in mind, whereas others are. And I've seen some really, really great gardens. I've been lucky enough to go to Jardin de Métis and Chaumont. When I went to Quebec, I went to see a friend of mine in New York, and then I got a connecting flight to Quebec. And I left New York, and it was 33 degrees, and I was in shorts and a t-shirt, and I arrived in Quebec, and it was pouring with rain, and they'd lost my suitcase. It was in Boston, And I turned up. It was freezing cold, and the passport, the guy on the passport control, looked at me with deep suspicion as I was standing there, dripping wet from having disembarked the plane on the runway, and then walked in pouring rain to the passport control. And he didn't speak any English, and he looked at me and was like, business, holiday, and I'm like, and he was obviously very, very concerned about everything about me, and then I sort of said, "Oh, business." And he's like, "What business? Horticulture, madam." Oh, I know. Chelsea Flower Show. Ah, Melville, the Chelsea Flower Show. Très bon. And on I went. Yeah, that was all I needed to
Unbelievable.
say. Yeah.
Exactly. That was just showing that, like you said a few minutes ago, about that week puts gardening, horticulture on
Yeah,
the map.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
How would
But
that man in Quebec know about it? That's the thing.
yeah, yeah.
Mm,
It's a global phenomenon, Chelsea. It's
yeah,
it's like when I was, growing up, and people would always equate, even though he'd been retired from racing for 20 years, people would say, if you're driving fast, who do you think you are, Sterling Moss?
yeah,
And it's kind of that, it's shorthand,
Yeah.
for in the same way that Alan Titchmarsh is shorthand for gardening, and Jeff Hamilton used to be, so
yeah.
yeah.
Mm. Oh, brilliant. So you touched briefly on your 2016 garden,
Mm.
and the other, the, it was the previous year, 2015. You did the other one, wasn't it?
Yeah, which was a zero irrigation
Yeah.
garden, so lots of
Yes. Really interested in that. Just tell us a
yeah.
bit about that.
Well, so the sponsor of that garden was Royal Bank of Canada, and they had their sort of corporate responsibility program was focused on the responsible use of fresh water, which of course, globally is a massive thing.
Mm.
And I was fortunate enough to go and see some of the work that they were doing in Canada, although the work is, as I say, global, particularly in developing countries. But in Canada, one of their big programs that they were involved in was trying to minimize invasive species in the Great Lakes. And they have a real problem, as we have in this country, of course, with invasive species in our watercourses. The American crayfish being probably the most
Mm.
notorious one, I guess. So they had developed this amazing thing. It's called a fish lift. And what happens, and I believe now they're fully kind of automated, because they've kind of effectively used the fish equivalent of a AMPR system, the thing that reads your number plates. But this
Yeah.
thing reads fish faces, apparently.
Wow.
In those days, it wasn't automated, but what you had was a sort of sluice system. And as fish were entering the Great Lakes system via various river tributaries, each one of them had this fish lift system, and the fish would swim into a sort of crate that would lift out of the water hydraulically, and still with water in it. And the people manning it or personing it could then see
Mm.
what fish were in the water, and if there was anything unwanted, that was immediately removed
Oh,
and
wow.
placed, dipped in batter and placed in uh, and the rest were allowed to swim off happily. I thought it was an amazing scheme.
Yeah.
So that was just one, but they were also doing a lot of work in developing countries to ensure, clean water supplies and so on. And, water, we have an interesting relationship with water in this country, of course, because we're always complaining about the rain, and we think that we have a lot of water. But of course, it's not as simple as that. And during periods of drought and weather stress, we abstract our water companies, because they are notoriously bad at
Mm.
handling their water, of course. I've got a good story to tell you about that in a minute, actually. I must remind myself to do that. They yeah, because of that, we do have periods of weather stress, and we do have situations where we're abstracting water from our river systems and putting very, very fragile, complex ecosystems at risk because
Mm.
of that. So I was I was really fired up by this idea. I'd previously designed a thing called the Dry Garden at Hyde Hall, which is, um, a zero irrigation garden, quite well known now. Now been there for 20+ years and never been watered. And I thought, well, great, I can use some of the knowledge from that, and I can also introduce the idea of um, water harvesting as well. But also, what I tried to do in that garden was use materials that didn't use water in their production. So,
Right.
so there was no steel in the garden, for example,
Hmm.
because 1 ton of steel requires 90 tons of water in its manufacture. So, and I
Yeah.
used stone that was from companies that had a policy of capturing and reusing all of their water runoff, because obviously stone cutting uses lots of water for cooling the
Mm.
blades down.
Yeah.
So there are companies out there, if you seek them out, that use water cooling systems for their cutting blades, but they capture and recycle
Yeah.
99% of the water. So a huge amount of research and thought went into that. What was pretty extraordinary is that absolutely none of that got mentioned at all in the, it's kind of like, it's like, oh, that's a nice garden. That's a drought garden, is it? Oh, that's nice. And it is quite fun. But that garden was. Well, I've got one of my. Well, I've got a couple of anecdotes related to that garden. The first was that I mentioned the garden museum earlier. I'd done an initial draft concept for the garden, and I had it in my mind. I knew exactly what it was going to be, and Christopher at the Garden Museum asked if I would host an event and interview Alan Titchmarsh live on stage. And I know Alan, reasonably well, and I thought, "Yeah, that'd be great fun. Yeah, of course I'll come and do that." And so, living in Southeast London at the time, so I got the bus up to the Garden Museum and interviewed Alan, and it all went really, really well. And towards the end, I said to him, now obviously Chelsea Flower Show is not a million miles away. I'd like to know, from you. I'm not going to ask you what your favourite garden is. You've probably been asked that 1,000 times, or your favourite plant or anything like that.
Yeah.
But what I would like to know is, what do you think is overdone at Chelsea? And he said, "Oh, do you know what? I'm absolutely sick of gardens with these kind of linear vistas, these straight lines, really predictable. Just bored of them. I'm just longing for a garden with curves."
Yeah.
And so anyway, we finished up, lovely evening, and I got back on the number 3 bus and went home. And in my notebook, I had my concept for my garden at Chelsea, which was all linear, straight lines. And I and I and I tore it. I tore it up. I tore it up, and I literally went like that on the bus on the way home. And and it turns out there's a very good reason why people do gardens with straight lines at Chelsea, because they're really easy to build.
Easy.
Gar- Gardens with complicated geometric interlocking curves are really quite difficult. And anyway, I've got a great photo of him and me on the garden on press day, with me pretending to strangle him and going, "It was all your bloody idea." Um, yeah. So, but I'm glad he said that, and I'm glad I changed the design. Because actually it it challenged me. One of the things that I think it's very easy to get stuck in a rut in any profession. I'm not just talking about garden design, but it can be very easy to settle back into a way of working. And I'm very pleased that in my working life I don't have a sort of set style. I like to think that I have certain values that I work to every time around the environment, sustainability, reusing and repurposing materials, and planting nectar and pollen-rich plants and trees that have got genuine longevity. They're kind of the cornerstones of how I work. But I also like to feel that I'm creating a different garden every time. I'm not recycling some kind of, oh, here's one I did earlier and now I'm going to do it again, And in that particular instance, Alan challenging me like that was a really, really good thing and a really positive thing. And my favorite sort of compliment, because it was a gravel garden, and I guess 2015 was the start of things. Maybe 2014, 15 was the start of Chelsea moving towards a more naturalistic approach. And I'm not suggesting for one moment that my garden was instrumental in that, but it was certainly part of that movement. And because it was a gravel garden, gravel was obviously prevalent. And I trick with gravel gardens. Anyone out there thinking of making a gravel garden, it's essential that you use gravel of several sizes, because then it has that beachy kind of, it looks as if it's not a driveway that someone's plonked some plants in. You've got to use different size gravel aggregate and use little pieces, bigger pieces like bits of stone, set those in. And I love doing it. I absolutely love doing that. I love it, just obsessively about it. Anyway, Tim Richardson, who is a journalist who writes a lot on landscapes for various magazines, done lots of books, he described my garden as having the best gaps at Chelsea. That made me very happy. The best gaps.
Yeah.
He didn't say what the bits in between the gaps were like, but he loved the gaps, so that made me very happy.
Perfect. As long as your gaps are loved, that's all that matters.
I was going to mention actually one a water-related anecdote, or water company-related anecdote. But this was actually a client of mine who shared this with me, which I thought was quite fascinating. So back in the 1850s, when people like Bazalgette were creating the London sewer network, there was obviously a huge amount of money going into the infrastructure of sewage and water dispersal and everything else. And at that time, it was recognised that the sensible way to do it would be to separate out sewage from floodwater, because that way you could use the sewage on the land. You could gather it up, and you had a massive supply of a fertilizer for farming, free.
Yeah.
Well, not quite free, of course, because you had to build the infrastructure to separate out the two different things. So you, instead of just one super sewer, you had to have two. So a lot more expensive to do that, but then free afterwards. What stopped it? What created the havoc that we have today? Bird poo. Someone discovered the guano-rich islands off the coast of South America, where they got meters and meters deep of bird poo, and went, oh, hello, we'll have that for fertilizer instead. And that is why we have the chaotic sewage system that we have today, because it was cheaper to hack the guano off the islands off the coast of South America and bring it back in boats than it was to create a sewage system that separated out sewage from rainwater.
Oh, God.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Unbelievable.
Short-sightedness.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
I know time's ticking on, but we've still got lots to talk about. Are you all right for a little bit?
Yeah.
So what I knew when Mark first said that you were coming on, I instantly question time. That, to me, it was straight away it's question time, because obviously you're on there lots. But what was strange for me is when over this last few days, watching different videos, interviews, and things, it's hard to put a face to a voice that you've heard so many times.
Yeah.
But just tell us about Question Time. I absolutely love it. Every week I'm there. Bang. That's my my go-to.
It is, without question, one of the greatest privileges of my life to be involved in that program.
I can imagine. Yeah.
I think in 2020, 2027, I think it is, or I think it's 2027. It will be celebrating its 80th anniversary.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that's what an incredible achievement. It's one of the longest running, I think it's the longest running radio program of its particular format, and it's one of the longest running radio programs in the world, full stop. And when you're involved in something like that, for me anyway, I take it, I like to think I take it very seriously, although I'm often told that I am, quote, the funny one.
Yes.
That's my, that's my job. But I do take it very seriously because I'm very conscious of the incredible lineage and heritage of that program, the amazing people who've been involved in it over the years. Roy Lancaster, Jeffrey Smith,
Mm.
Jeff Hamilton. These sort of absolute titans of the horticultural world, and and indeed on the current panel, you've got Pippa Greenwood and Anne Swithenbank and Bob Flowerdew and
Yeah.
Christine Walkden and Matt Biggs. It's
Amazing.
great names of incredible people with a collective knowledge that is just mind-boggling. And for me as a panelist, it's one of the great things is when you're on a show, and I've done quite a few recently. I did a couple recently with Anne and Pippa, and then I've just done a couple recently with Marcus Chilton Jones, who is the curator at RHS Bridgewater, and is very knowledgeable and great fun, and Bunny Guinness, who we just always argue, which is also great fun. We have differing opinions on just about everything, but we always kiss and make up at the end. And it's brilliant when you're on a program like that and a question comes in, and you can give the questioner three different perspectives on that question, not three different answers, because it might be just different angles of the same answer. And you can disagree, and you can learn something. I mean, every single show I come away having learned something, not just something, several things normally.
Yeah.
And obviously, we all know, and everyone, listening to this will know that is one of the great appeals of gardening anyway, is that it is this continual mind expansion. You can kind of, you can compare the world of horticulture with any branch of science, with medicine, with whatever. It's a lifetime of learning. Which is one of the great appeals. If you are willing to come into it with an open mind, you will always learn. And I think if you want to stay young, learn something every day. This is like that, and some, stay out of the sun, and some good moisturizer. They're top tips. But it's hard to stay out of the sun when you're gardening, obviously.
Yeah.
But no, I love it. I love the process. I love the fact that it takes us to interesting places. We've been to some extraordinary places over the year. We've been doing it for 16 years now, and we've recorded from some really unusual places. I've recorded. Well, we recorded from Frogmore Cottage, which is the late Queen's personal residence, so literally her house. And that was extraordinary because it was like being in a little old lady's house. It was just with the kid, the grandchildren's pictures on the wall. It was literally like that. I used her loo and everything. I've recorded at 10 Downing Street, which was amazing. Sitting in a room in what they call it, the White Room, I think they call it, and it's where all the sort of visiting dignitaries wait, or go for their meeting with the sitting Prime Minister. And behind me, there's a portrait of President Obama sitting in the chair that I'm sitting in.
Oh my goodness. Unbelievable, isn't it?
And the most incredible thing there, actually, one of the most moving things I've seen in my life, 10 Downing Street has got quite a lot of art, which is owned by us. It doesn't belong to 10 Downing Street. It's owned by the people of Britain, although a lot of it's never seen because it's there. But obviously, there are lots of things that are given to the state by visiting presidents and so on. And a lot of it is art, and some of it is very, very interesting, and everything else. But when I was there, there was a sort of a stand with a perspex box in the hallway, and inside this perspex box was a crumpled piece of lined paper that had been torn out of a notebook, and it was written on in a red Sharpie kind of pen, and in Spanish. And I can't read Spanish very well. I can kind of speak holiday Spanish. That's about it. And I stared at it, and then I couldn't get my phone out because my phone was locked in a cabinet down by the front door, because they take that off you the moment you go in. But I found somebody who could translate it for me. And that little note said, "We are the 33 and we are alive." And it was the Chilean miners who'd been caught up in that terrible disaster. And it was the first note that they managed to send up to the surface to tell the rescuers on the surface that they were still
Keep
alive.
going. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
Unbelievable.
I literally, I just burst into tears on the spot. Actually,
Yeah, I
I've got to be
bet.
honest with
Yeah.
you. It was so incredible. So it's been a massive, massive privilege to be involved in that program, and it remains a privilege to be in that program, and to meet extraordinary people. We always get to visit great gardens. We get to do, I managed to fit in quite a few features. So when we record, we normally do one or two features, and sometimes that might be something historical, or it might be did a great feature with Jeremy Irons in his garden. He's talking about his passion for gardening. It was pouring with rain, and I'd come with a raincoat, but I hadn't any kind of waterproof hat now, and it was really slinging it down. And he said, "Oh, don't worry, darling, I've got something for you." And he went to his cupboard and fished out this sort of wide-brimmed leather rancher's hat. He went, "There you go, have that." Yeah, I wore that I think it was a Wes Anderson movie that I can't remember now. No, it was a Western. It was a Western. That's right. Yeah, like, what on earth is it called? It's a five sense of humor. I can't remember. Anyway, you wear that while we go around the garden, and off we went. With me wearing his
Wow.
amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I've met people, unsung people who who've done extraordinary things. Met a guy. we stayed overnight in a castle in Cumbria when we did one program, and the chap whose family home it was, been handed down for generations. He could write with his left hand and his right hand at the same time, mirror image.
Oh my goodness.
He was about 85, this guy, and he sat in front of us and wrote in mirror image like that. That was his party trick. Yeah, it's been it is, I know that there always tends to be a sort of emphasis towards television somehow as being the kind of senior service. I think, having done both radio and television, I love TV, but I think radio has a special quality to it, and that special quality is, I think it is. I think it's part of the reason why podcasts have become so popular. When you listen to radio or listen to a podcast, you listen. It's not. It's very rarely background noise. It's something that you are engaging with, and the voice. You don't have the distraction almost of the image. You have the voice to concentrate on, and that carries a real depth to it. I think it really does.
Definitely.
So no,
I've
it's
just got to say,
been amazing.
when you were just talking about in Downing Street in the White Room, and you said there was a perspex box with a piece of lined paper ripped out of a notepad. I
Yeah.
thought you were going to say it was my linear drawing for 2015 Chelsea card.
Yeah, with a little with a little, a little smiley face, and Alan was here written underneath it. Yeah,
It'd been chucked out the number 3 bus out the
yeah.
window.
That would be good. Yeah.
That'd be
um,
Darren Brown.
Yeah.
yeah. Um, completely different subject. Tell us about, you've got an album coming out this year?
Yes. Oh, this is very exciting. So I've always I've always been into music, listening to it, playing it. It's a massive, massive part of my life, and one of the things I'm really happy about is that both our kids seem to have inherited a real interest in and it's a really dynamic interest in music. You know, they're not kind of like, oh, this is my thing and that's what I'm listening to. They'll be listening to, you know, Mac DeMarco 1 minute and Kendrick Lamar the next minute. And you know, the other day I walked into my daughter's bedroom and she was listening to the Smiths and she went, oh yeah, you might like this band. They're called the Smiths. So she goes, yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I know the Smiths. Yeah,
Yeah,
all right, I'm down. I'm down with them, girl. Yeah. Um, so you know, really eclectic interest in music and a real joy for music, which I like. So music is a joyous thing for me and always has been. And many years ago, I thought it was what my life and career was going to be. Was music. And I was in several bands, and one band I was in. Actually, this is the internet and social media gets a lot of grief. This is a story about the sort of positive aspects. I was in a band we were a synth duo in the days when that was a thing. 1984, we released a single. The band was called Almost Alone, and we released this single. See what we did there? Almost Alone, because there's only two of
yeah,
us. Almost.
yeah.
And we released a single called Blue City, which sunk without a trace. And but you know, it was of its time. And many years later, many years later, my compadre Simon, who I was in the band with, emailed me with this link to a New York-based blogger who writes about, I assume still does, sort of rare synth dance stuff from the 80s. And he said, I've got this record by this UK, I think they're a UK band. They're called Almost Alone, and I'm playing this now in my club nights, and it always goes off when I drop this record. People love it, you know.
Brilliant.
And he posted a little download link to the record, you know, and there it was, all its scratchy glory. And it just took off, and we got this email from a record company. In fact, two record companies got in touch with us, both with brilliant names. One called Medical Records, brilliant name for a record company. Why has no one ever thought of that before? And the other one called Dead Wax Recordings. And between them, they said, "Can one said, we want to remaster and re-release your single on a compilation album, vinyl." And the other said, we want to re-release your back catalogue of unreleased tracks. So our little output from all those years ago had a whole new life. And those records, those albums are quite collectible. One's kind of like not massively collectible, well, like 30, 40 quid. The other one you pay 150 quid for.
Oh,
And the
wow.
single, there's somebody's got a copy of that single, Blue City, which they're selling on eBay for 250 quid.
Wow.
Rare as
Unbelievable.
rare as hen's, and it's described in his little eBay description. It says one of the rarest and most sought after classic tracks of the 80s. So classic track. So there you go. So I'm 50% responsible for a classic track from the
Brilliant.
80s.
Yeah.
So that was a long time ago. And anyway, and then since then I've been in various bands, and then I went for a period of time of not playing music and thinking, well, that's probably it. No, probably that's done now. And then we moved to Rutland, and within sort of a year or so, a couple of guys in my village said, you know, do you fancy kind of getting together and, you know, playing, just like strumming a bit or whatever, I was like, yeah, okay. Still had one guitar. And we got together and started playing a bit, and then it kind of developed, and suddenly I got another guitar, and I've got 5 now. And quite a few pedals, and it all kind of grew. And originally we were just playing other people's songs, sitting in one or the other's front room, and then our keyboard player Nino said, "I've written this song. If you want to hear it, and he was quite shy about it. And we're like, "Yeah, let's hear it." It was like, "This is great." So we started playing that, and then our guitarist Chris was like, well, I've written a song. Can I play it? And he said, "Yeah, this is great." And then I've always been a songwriter, so I started like knocking some songs into the mix as well. And before we know it, we're in a recording studio recording this album, and it's coming out in June. And we've got our first single coming out in March. And we're doing a little tour in the summer and playing sort of various gigs. And final gig will be in London. And we're called the Low Keys, Lokeys.
Brilliant.
We're on Instagram at Low Keys Band Rutland, Lokeys, or Low Keys Band, I think. Yeah, Low Keys Band. Yeah, so it's great. And do you know what? We all benefit from all the sort of mental health and physical health benefits of gardening.
Mm.
And I would say if you have an interest in music, or you've been thinking about playing a musical instrument or learning a musical instrument, do it. Do it. It's men in particular, we're terrible at spending time with groups of our peers and just being with other blokes and hanging out.
Mm.
And we're terrible at that. We're terrible at kind of switching off from stuff. We're terrible at sort of being part of a sort of collective endeavor and sharing our thoughts and feelings. And tell you what, you join a band, all of that happens. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. And especially now in my 50s, all the sort of petty stuff that used to be part of being in a band, creative differences, darling. That's not, none of that's there, It's just good times. It's just enjoying being in each other's company. We get together 2 or 3 times a month, and we just jam, and we play our songs, and we write new songs, and we're all at different levels in terms of our history with music. So myself and Chris, the guitarist, have probably got the longest pedigree, having been in lots of bands, and Chris's band released an album back in the day, and so we've been around music for a long time. And Nino, Chris, and Thomas, our drummer, much less so. And it's just it's just a great thing. It's really good fun. And clearly, I'm not anticipating giving up the day job and going on a world tour, supporting the Rolling Stones on their finale gig or whatever. I don't think that's going to happen, but it doesn't matter. We've made something, and in that same sense of deep fulfillment that we get from making something happen in the garden, I get we are all getting from this process that we're going through with making the album. And we're doing it on a limited edition vinyl to get the whole joy of having an actual vinyl record.
Wow.
It's great. Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's our next gig.
Look out for that.
Then, Jamie.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll let you know.
Come have a look.
Yeah,
you're sort of in the middle of me and Jamie anyway. So if you're doing a gig in Rutland, we can.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We can.
I tell you, I'll send you it. I'll send you both an invitation to the album launch gig, which is at Madison Square Garden. Was fully booked apparently, so we're going for Uppingham Town Hall instead. So. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic!
Absolutely come if you.
Yeah, don't you worry. I will definitely invite you. Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm
brilliant.
Making a note of that right now.
Lovely. We could. I know. We could keep talking for hours, Matthew. But it's now 9:15, so we've been going an hour and 3
We've done all right, haven't we?
I know, it's been brilliant.
I hope people
absolutely brilliant.
Aren't exhausted.
No.
I hope everyone's had a good time and they're not thinking, "Oh my God, get me the Xanax right now."
Definitely not. definitely not. We're not quite finished. There's still a little bit left.
Okay.
As a lightning round of questions.
Ah,
Everybody dreads this.
oh,
We like to
okay.
finish with that nice, easy way to let you go before you
Very
go, and
good.
we'll learn some things. So the
Yeah.
first question, which I've added especially for you, is
Oh,
favourite band
Ah,
/ artist.
wow.
oh,
Well
that's
done, Mark.
so hard. You cad, sir. You bounder. Oh, that is so difficult. Uh, well, that's really hard. It would be easy when I was 17, 18. It would be The Cure. That would be
Mm,
very, very easy. I was obsessed with them, but then my things have changed and moved forward. Oh God! I mean, at one point it would have been Van Morrison. I that day, do you know what? There is an album that I would hate to be without. So I'm gonna narrow it down to this particular album. It's by a band called Cherry Ghost. It wasn't a particularly big album at the time. The album's called Thirst for Romance. It came out in 2005. And Simon Aldred was I don't think he's even in the business anymore. He was a great songwriter. He won an Ivor Novello Award for the title track of that album, Thirst
wow.
for Romance. It's a really great album. So possibly not my favorite artist because I've got lots of those,
Mm,
but that would be my Desert Island album. Is that all right? Bit of a cop
yeah.
Brilliant,
out.
yeah.
No,
What
no,
an
good.
album I've never heard of, so I'll have to have a listen to
Oh
that
yeah,
tomorrow
it's
while
really
I'm in
Yeah.
good.
the garden.
Yeah,
Next one's a bit easier. Tea or coffee?
coffee,
Good choice. Flowers or edibles?
flowers. Sorry.
Beach or forest?
That's hard because one of my favorite places on earth is the beach at Dungeness. I love the bleakness. I'm not doing very well with quick fire, am I? But then, having said that, oh, forest. Yeah.
Forest wins. What's your go-to emoji in a text message?
Oh my God! If my kids could hear this, be like, they don't even know what emojis are. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
It's the easy one.
That's a good one.
Good classic one, isn't it? Uh, if you could have one snack for the rest of your life, what would it be?
One snack.
Yeah.
Oh, you really are crushing it. These are hard questions. Uh, um, mm, mm, mm. Churros with chocolate sauce in a town square in
Oh,
Spain.
oh my God.
That sounds amazing.
Mm,
Very, very good choice there.
definitely.
Yeah,
Finish the sentence. My perfect day would be.
spending it with you two.
Oh, look
uh,
at
my
that.
my perfect day would be a long dog walk in the country with my family and obviously the dogs, with a picnic and a lovely view somewhere along the way, ideally near a river.
Fantastic.
That sounds amazing.
Mm.
Sowing seeds or potting on?
Sowing seeds.
Oh,
Mm.
I was not sure you'd choose either of those because after listening to you on another podcast, you said it was your wife that did all that sort of faffing. You didn't really
Yes,
like that side of things.
that's why I said it so quickly and so authoritatively.
Spring or summer?
Spring.
Good choice.
Love the green.
Today's
Love the
Yeah.
verdant. Yeah,
all just starting to come back to life, and it's
Yeah,
like, oh,
yeah, definitely.
finally the
yeah,
winter is over.
exactly.
Today's favourite plant.
Today's favorite plant. I am gonna say I was down near our greenhouse earlier, and there's a little gravel garden out the front with some lovely salvias, including Salvia candelabra. But the Euphorbia wolfenii, the bracts are just forming, just coming in, and it's one of those signals of hope, isn't it?
Mm.
Like the first, because
Yeah,
daffodils
yeah.
aren't up yet in my
No,
garden, but that's
mine.
happening. And it's a little, here I am, and in a bit I'm going to be whoosh. So yeah.
There we go.
It's a good variety as well. There's one called Lambert Gold. It's a really nice one. Yeah.
I know that one. Yeah, it's nice. Unlimited compost or unlimited seeds?
I think unlimited seeds, because therein lies the path to happiness with Mrs. Wilson.
If you could choose one plant to describe yourself, what would it be?
It would be my favourite tree, English oak, because I think English oaks age with character. Bits fall off them, but they still look all right. And even if they're struck by lightning, they're still reasonably handy in the landscape.
Great
So
description.
yeah, I think all of that would apply to me, especially the lightning bit.
And they've got a good story to tell as well, just like you.
Good story to tell, yeah. And the other one, I would not, I can, but I'm not full of insects. That's the one thing I would say. So
just let us know what's fallen off then.
my hair.
Come on.
Okay.
Final one. If you could have a gardening superpower, what would it be?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think if I could have a gardening superpower, it would be the power to, without any effort, encourage the entire world to garden.
Yeah, that is the correct answer.
Really good. Really good.
I think you get 1,000 points for that.
Can you imagine if Donald Trump gardened instead of being Donald Trump?
The world would be
if he just if he just spent some time looking at some flowers, just you got his hand in the compost. You were saying earlier, Jamie, about the power of getting your hands in compost and the serotonins, and we are all animals, aren't we? Ultimately, we've got all the fancy gear, but we are just animals at the end of the day. We might be very, very developed, but we are animals. And those connections, making those basic connections with the things that are a link to our prehistoric selves, it's like essential to human being, as far as I can see.
You need amazing. His whole head shoving in a bit of compost to give him some serotonin, I think.
Maybe he does it anyway. Maybe that's where the orange comes from.
Possibly sandy soil.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've just had an idea. I think we need to give you a bit of a challenge.
Yes.
Next time you're on GQT, you've got to make a reference to a garden gate.
Okay. Very good. I've had various challenges like that set to me over the years. I haven't done one for a long time though, so that's good. That's good. I shall enjoy that very much.
Even better if you can say through the garden gate.
Through the garden gate, I will do it. Leave it with me.
Fantastic.
Your wish is my
Matthew,
command.
I have definitely. I think everybody else had fantastic time. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's been a real pleasure. I'm so glad that you asked me, and I've really enjoyed myself. Thank you very much, guys.
It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you live in concert.
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Tickets will be with you. Yeah, absolutely. Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Thanks ever so much. See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.
What can you say?
Amazing.
What can you say?
I knew it would be a good one.
Yeah, of course it is.
It was not disappointed, that is for sure.
No. So is nearly 2 hours the top one?
I'm trying to think if we've actually had one that goes over the 2 hours mark before, and I know Chris might have done.
he was
but
close.
yeah, it was definitely a long one. But that, I could have talked for another hour. To be honest, I don't think we
Yeah.
even
Oh yeah,
scratched
no,
the
definitely.
surface.
Didn't even talk about his garden at
No,
home, really. So
well,
there was
exactly. I was going to say we didn't even go into his garden, and
no nothing.
he's quite local to me as well. Rutland, it's
Yeah,
only
yeah, it's not far.
45 minutes, something like that away.
Yeah, we that's about that for us. Whenever we go, I think when we go to Milton Keynes, we go through Rutland.
And it's where Jenny lives. Yeah, Jenny's saying, can we have part two? Definitely. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
maybe we'll
yeah,
do
yeah.
one
We will.
live with him when we go to see him. We'll get him
Yeah,
we'll record
good. Yeah,
an
fantastic.
extra bit. But yeah, what you were saying about what he does as well is I was just thinking, that's what I work in a garden like what he produces, because he was talking about the Chelsea is his sort of selling thing, and then he goes on and does private gardens that nobody
Exactly,
sees, and that's what
exactly.
I
Yeah, it's just
describe
that's like
where I work.
his gallery to someone who does paintings. So that he needs somewhere to show off what he can do.
And I always think it's sad that the Chelsea gardens after that week almost disappear, because especially, I don't know whether it's better nowadays, but if you try and look back to see the gardens that the designer of where I work did, you can't find it. Like, it's quite sad that those gardens are just lost.
I think the part of it now is that they have to, or the majority of it has to go and be relocated somewhere,
Yeah,
isn't it? That's a
yeah,
big thing. I know that I've listened to loads of things, and they say years ago they used to scoop up and put them in skips and bin them,
yeah.
but now I think the big part of it they have to, they have to relocate them somewhere. Yeah,
Yeah, he must be quite close to Barnsdale, my dad said.
right.
Yeah,
I'm eating
brilliant.
I'm eating my dinner really late tonight.
I was going to say, if you've still got your dinner to eat, then it's going to be cold.
I know. Yeah. Never mind. It was worth it. Definitely.
Here's
Right.
one more story I've
Go on,
got that happened last week as we came off air. So last week in the evening, our neighbours on the other end of the row of houses to us had lost their dog. It had been attacked by another dog whilst walking in the village
Oh no.
and had ran off. So everyone was out looking for it and all the rest of it. So we were all worried about this poor dog that had ran off and hadn't made it home. And just as we'd come off of through the garden gate last Tuesday, and I was obviously have to write in the description and then tag everyone and post it. I could hear this dog barking. So I'm trying to get this blooming live saved so that I could go out and see if it was their dog.
Yeah.
And I went out in the garden and had a look around the garden, and I could hear this dog barking. So then I'd finally got through the garden gate on and got on the phone to the neighbours to say, is that your dog barking? I've looked in our garden, but it's close by. You might want to go out in your garden and have a look. And said, right, we'll go do it. And it was, their dog it found its way back, and I heard it barking. So if we hadn't finished at that exact point, it might not have got heard.
Yeah. Perfect.
So yeah, that was just a strange coincidence from last week.
Ending for the dog.
Very happy ending.
Yeah. Right. Thanks ever so much, everybody. Thank you, Mark. I'll speak to you soon.
See you next week.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
See you next week.
Thank you for listening to Through the Garden Gate.